College football continues to change. Everything looks completely different than it did when we all grew up looking at the sport. So, how can we accept this change? Well, we just kind of have to move along with it, whether we agree with it or not. The other changes that are rumored is more expansion. Now, nothing's going to happen today. Probably nothing's going to happen tomorrow. Probably will nothing will happen this season. They put a they put the brakes on when Texas and Oklahoma decided to go to the SEC. Then they put a brakes after UCLA and USC decided to go to the Big Ten, and the big expansion to the Big 12, adding the likes of Cincinnati and Houston, BYU, those teams heading off to the Big 12, and adding some others to the Pac 12. The next rumor is the ACC. The ACC had gotten rid of their they shook up their conference where you have the Big Ten West and East and their divisions. The ACC has said we are not going to do any more divisions, which was smart in their point. But we are finally getting told what they already know. The big wigs, the athletic directors, the presidents, the TV media people who are running the show behind the scenes, they have their fingers on the strings and their puppet mastery of what is going on in college football because it's all about money. People can say it's about safety. People can say it's about whatever they want, but ultimately it comes down to TV deals and money. And now this aim, image, and likeness as well has taken over. But it has come out that there is teams that have talked about going to the SEC. So we're going to talk about the ACC teams that have reportedly come out that want to leave. And they're talking about SEC. Now, they could also be talking about the Big Ten. And we're going to discuss what the road of college football is headed and what eventually could maybe possibly happen. Now, could some of these things happen? Maybe not. But it's now the realm of possibility of what we're seeing already happen in the landscape of college football because everything right now is driven by money. It is slowly turning into we have our XFL and USFL, which is the minor league of the NFL, and people consider college football that as well. If you look at the top tier of college football, perhaps, but that's what it is heading towards. It is now heading towards that road. But the ACC may be the next thing to blow up. Now, the ACC has contracts with these schools till the 2030s. And so if they were to break these deals, they would have to pay upwards of about $120 million, which is a ton of money. Now, there's ways around this. They could negotiate. The other conferences make so much money. There's a way to get out of this. These schools also have money to do this. So there's ways around this, but it is talked about certain schools already talking about leaving. The top dog of the ACC that is reportedly talked about leaving is Clemson. Clemson has talked about and reportedly going to come out and try to join the SEC. Now, it makes sense for them if they were to join the SEC. One, they're already in South Carolina. You know, they're an SEC country anyway with South Carolina there, and they're connected to other states in the South. They also look like and play like an SEC team. They usually have big players. The way their offense is structured, they just look, especially in their championship days, they look like an SEC team. They beat Alabama's of the world. They beat other teams in the playoff. Now they breeze through the ACC. It's talked about how not good the conference is, which I agree with. But guess what? If they're not getting beat up on all year, they were able to come in and beat Alabama. They were able to come in and beat, other teams in the playoffs. They just look like an SEC team. So from a money perspective and the location of joining the SEC and how they recruit, Dabo Swinney said, if we're going to beat Alabama and beat them, we have to recruit and do things similar to them if we're going to beat them. And they did. They already play their in-state rivalry, South Carolina, every year. Now they join the SEC. They'll be right there. The only thing that this doesn't almost make sense for is the SEC. Now, you're going to bring in that market, but you already have the state of South Carolina with South Carolina. South Carolina is not on par with Clemson over the past years when Dabo Swinney finally got it turned around. So that part you could sit there and say, well, they're not bringing too much. When the Big Ten expanded to get Rutgers in, they're bringing in the New Jersey New York market and also with Maryland. So when they expand to that point, when they're expanding with UCLA and USC, bringing the California market into the Big Ten, that makes a lot of sense. If you already have the state of South Carolina, would you add Clemson to that? I still think they would, but I could see why there's a pause or pumping the brakes on this. But Clemson joining the SEC does make a lot of sense because they already feel like an SEC team, in my opinion. The next one talked about is Florida State. Florida State already plays an SEC rival school in the Florida Gators. Now, do they fit in the SEC? Reports say that they do. It says it makes a lot of sense because of where they're located, recruiting wise. FSU wants that money. I personally don't think that Florida State fits in with the SEC. Last year they turned it around. They played a lot better. They look to me like a Big Ten team. The type of athletes that are there, type of style they play, the campus, the recruiting. I think the Big Ten would make a push for Florida because then you could try to get the state of Florida market, push more down south as well. And I think Florida State just looks and feels like a Big Ten team. It would make sense to join the SEC because of location and travel. Florida State decides to join the Big Ten. That's a lot of travel up in the Midwest, East, and then they got to go. I hope the schedule would work out where once a year they got to fly all the way out to California. Now, so for the travel part, makes more sense for the SEC, but from a team perspective of what they look like and what it feels like, it just feels like the Big Ten will make more sense. But they are making a push to also maybe join the SEC as well. And that's a lot of teams. We're not done yet. The Miami Hurricanes, talked about leaving. It's talked about leaving as well. Talking about expanding to the SEC. Playing Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, trying to renew the rivalry in Florida. Again, this team feels more like a Big Ten team. Makes way more sense for the Big Ten to try to get them, and it makes way more sense for Miami to maybe try to go to the Big Ten now, travel, everything else. But if you're the Big Ten and you're saying, okay, can I get Florida State and or Miami to make that push more down south, open up that recruiting, open up that TV market, especially in Miami. Miami and USC had a big time rivalry before. You could bring that back. If Miami starts to turn around, I think that would fit better than them going to the SEC. I don't think them going to the SEC would do them much. Yeah, they could turn around recruiting. They get money. They get more money in the Big Ten. The Big Ten has a bigger media market. The Big Ten network makes way more money than the SEC. So I think Miami, the other one that's talking about going to the SEC, I think they need to pump their brakes as well. And they need to consider going to the Big Ten just because of the type of players they have. You could just have a feel. You feel that Alabama is an SEC team. You feel that Mississippi State is an SEC team. You feel that Georgia is in Tennessee. You just have that feeling. Even though I'm not there, you just have that feeling. And so far, the ACC feels like that. But I think Miami would benefit more going to the Big Ten than they would the SEC. The other team talking about leaving is North Carolina. North Carolina, same thing with Miami and Florida State. I just think that they look like a Big Ten team. And that would be smart. Again, if you're a Big Ten, you're trying to get to North Carolina, you're looking to the South, you're looking to the East Coast. Look at North Carolina. And North Carolina can travel up the East Coast and Midwest, be a long travel over to California. But if you do it once a year for football, now this is only football, I'm not talking about other sports. I think that this would work better for the Big Ten. It'd be fun to see North Carolina play South Carolina. I think that would be a nice rival type game going in the SEC. But I think that the matchups with North Carolina versus the Ohio States, the Michigans, and Maryland and Penn State, Illinois, Purdue, those type of teams, North Carolina matches up way better from recruiting standpoint, the type of players they have, the style of play. They would also fit better in the Big Ten, but they are trying to make a push as well to the SEC. And I think it's just because of location. A lot of this is location, and a lot of this is just kind of seeing where we're headed in college football, which we'll talk about at the end. But North Carolina is making that push to try to join the SEC as well. The next one in state as well with North Carolina is North Carolina State. They are only maybe going to move if North Carolina makes a move, because of them being an in-state rivalry with North Carolina. They're not ones that are necessarily pushing for it. They're going to be more of the followers. They're going to sit back and see, okay, are all these big time people going? Because they had a nice season last year as well. They are not pushing as much to go to the SEC because I think they know that that's not where they need to go. They need to be an ACC team, or they need to go to the Big Ten. They would fit again perfectly into the Big Ten. And if North Carolina is considering leaving, the Big Ten would sit there and say, that'd be really cool to have another in-state rival with North Carolina and North Carolina State, like Indiana and Purdue, Illinois and Northwestern, Michigan State. These in-state rival teams would be a cool thing to have as well. So a lot of the big-time players in the so far are thinking more better fit for the Big Ten. The next two we're both going to talk about at the same time because they're in the same state as well, is Virginia and Virginia Tech. The location of Virginia is in Big Ten territory. They are not making as big as a push to join the SEC. They're making a push just to leave the ACC. And the Big Ten, once again, feels like a Big Ten team. The location, the East Coast, they wouldn't have to travel south as much if they try to join the SEC. Trying to recruit to get more players up towards Virginia away from the South would be difficult. And they're already close to the Big Ten schools. And the travel wouldn't be as bad besides California, but that's going to be tough for everybody unless you're right down in the middle like Illinois and Iowa in them. It's going to be more difficult. Virginia Tech is farther up the East Coast. And if you're the Big Ten, you look at Virginia, you would have to consider Virginia Tech. But Virginia Tech historically has been better football program than Virginia. And I think the SEC would have to consider Virginia Tech because of historically, if they could turn it around. Right now, no. Right now, they could look like a Big Ten team. The Big Ten team is being just as competitive as the SEC. But for an example, Virginia Tech a couple years ago, they went to play Tennessee and they had 157,000 fans. So Virginia Tech travels well. They would have to consider the type of market they get from Virginia Tech if you're the SEC. Again, the Big Ten would make a big push to say, okay, Virginia, you have an in-state rival in Virginia Tech. Just that fits perfectly well in the Big Ten. We could separate you guys in divisions and just where you're located. Now, if you're the Big Ten, are you going to sit there and say, okay, we want to dominate all of these states? Are you the SEC saying, I want to dominate all these states? Is there something where maybe Virginia goes to the Big Ten, Virginia Tech goes to SEC, North Carolina or North Carolina State go to the Big Ten, the other one goes to SEC? Maybe. But these are the teams that have talked about getting out of the ACC. So the ACC just got rid of their divisions, and now it's about to maybe possibly get blown up. And the possibility of it getting blown up is true. Now, it depends on how it goes. But where is college football headed right now? There's a couple avenues that it's heading right now, and we've already known this. It's heading towards two major conferences, and right now it's going to be the Big Ten and SEC. That is what is happening. They are all joining together because they get more media markets, the money, the recruiting, more people getting into the name, image, and likeness business. This is where college football is headed, where we're going to have two major – it's not going to be Power 5, it's going to be the Power 2, because now you can keep considering the Pac-12 teams. Would Washington consider going to the Big Ten? Could Oregon consider going to the Big Ten? Could some of the other schools say, okay, let's go to the SEC? But will the SEC allow some of those teams? Do they feel like they're worthy of being there? Could it be those two power schools and the Pac-12 and Big 12 try to combine to compete with them? We are heading towards a Power 2 right now. That's where college football is headed. We're no longer going to have this Power 5 where everything was quote unquote fair. Everything was quote unquote even when they played each other. It's just going to be everybody's going to combine into these big conferences. And it's going to look like the NFL, where you have the NFC and the AFC. That's what this is going towards. We are heading towards an NFL model. And people want to go towards that route because when they talk about college football expansion, what does everybody keep talking about? Well, the NFL's figured it out. We are pushing that. So what's the best way to get there? Well, we've expanded the college football playoff already. What's the next best way to do it? Well, all the schools that are going to make it are the conference champions and everything else. Well, if you get a Power 2, you can expand it to an NFL type of setting. If you had the Power 2 and you had the Big Ten and SEC, would you have like the Big Ten East, the Big Ten West, Big Ten North, whatever? Would you have the SEC South, East, Northwest, and put them into pod? I don't know if you want to call them pods. You put them into regions, and that's what they're called. And whoever wins those regions gets to the playoff. That's kind of where college football is now headed. And then if you have the Pac-12 and the Big 12, whatever is left over, ACC, if they all combined, because it seems like once ACC starts breaking off, they're just going to get split between the SEC and the Big 10. I don't see the travel from East Coast stuff, all of that, going towards California and them. You could just see the Big 12, Pac-12 combined into whatever they want to be called. And you have the Big 10 and the SEC take over the rest of the United States. And they're going to say, screw you, Pac-8, 18, the Big 18, whatever you want to be called. They're going to say, screw you. And we're going to go to this NFL model where you're going to have the powers that be, and this is what's going to happen. And you're going to be able to get a different playoff, which is what everybody wants. But is it going to be fair? Is it going to be what the traditions of everything that we've talked about with college football that we love, where now we have these two Power 2s? The other road that this is heading towards in college football is what's going to happen when they get big enough. If these Power 2s get big enough and they realize these colleges can live off of the money they're making from TV deals, sponsorships, and endorsements, whatever it is, if they can figure that out and they can start to see the name, image, likeness money and they start to figure all that out, what's going to stop those Power 2s tell the schools, you can maybe survive if you get away from the NCAA. If you make it where you're still a school, but you get away from the academic part of the NCAA to where it's no longer student athletes, it could break away from that. And then the NCAA and all them have no control. They'd have to create their own governing body, or they would get away from the academic side of it. So there's no more GPA to stay on there. It's free agent market. It's literally going to be the G League, the minor league of the NFL, which to some it already is. And eventually I think that could be, now this isn't going to happen tomorrow. This isn't going to happen next year. This is years and years and years of maybe seeing how this goes. There's a possibility that, because Alabama, could their sports run off of winning all these championships? Could they survive off of ticket sales and selling things, merchandise? Could they live off all that stuff? Could they live off of TV deals? Could they live off of all that? And if these Power 2s become big enough, maybe you see that they break away and it's no longer student athletes. It will literally become the minor league. And if they work it out, they could still have the name, image part of the school. And eventually this is what's going to happen. And I think you're going to see heading down that road, because we're talking about college football expansion. They're trying to get to this Power 2 because of TV deals and contracts, because that's who's in control. They have the fingers on the strings in the background. This is where I think college football is headed. It'll be very interesting to see if ACC teams start to leave to the Big Ten and SEC, and you got a couple Pac-12s that decide to go as well, don't be surprised if years from now, this is the kind of thing that will happen to college football. And because we keep talking about college football playoff expansion, and this is what's kind of brought this on because of who they're letting in when the college football expansion happens. The first year that it happens, when you start seeing who they let in, they're going to start changing some things. Money talks. So we'll see what happens with college football later on down the road. Thank you guys for watching and or listening. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Follow right on Apple and iTunes. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Check out all the affiliates in the description below as well. Check out all the other videos. So thank you guys again. This is Coach Steve, and we'll see you guys next time.